this session so that people can access the content. The previous 2 sessions have already been recorded, obviously, and the links sent out. We'll be sending all 3 links out after this. So really appreciate you spending the time with us. We are on session 3. If you haven't joined the previous sessions, as I said, please feel free to go back and have a listen to the recordings, all about segmentation and policy in healthcare environments. And today is kind of the culmination of that, where, as I say, the rubber hits the road, getting that policy, getting that segmentation onto the infrastructure, both wired and wireless, everything from automating at scale with .1x, right through to micro segmentation, and Matt's going to demo all of that today and take us through that. Just a bit on the housekeeping, please provide the feedback afterwards. We much appreciate that. We're all contactable as well. And during the session, we've got panelists who are all taking questions. So please try not to put the questions in the chat. Please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. That's bottom right-hand corner, the 3 dots, the breadcrumbs. Click on that, you'll find Q&A panel there. We've got experts on hand to answer all your questions. So without further ado, because he's got a lot of great stuff to take us through, lots of demo and information, Matt Graham, our healthcare solutions engineer. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you, James. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah, all coming through nicely.
Just checking. So yeah, thank you everybody. Again, as James, just to reiterate what James said, thank you ever so much for joining this. It is something that we really enjoy doing, and yeah, the more we can get this message out to people, the better. So as James said, there's an awful lot. This consists really of obviously building on the background of the previous 2 sessions, and specifically around what Jonathan demonstrated last time for you. So we're actually going to show you this in action. That was my plan for this. It's quite a brave thing to do. And apologies, there is something wrong with my laptop and there's a bit of a delay. So James, if you could keep me on point if things don't pop up, that would be fantastic. So
sure.
We're going to look really at why, how we can use some of the tools that a lot of you already got to actually deploy what we're talking about and secure your networks. And we'll go through some of the reasons why and what the options are that you've got available to you. So first question is, why secure the wired network? It's standard practice across wireless, so why don't we do it on wired? There's a couple of reasons. It's to prevent shadow IT, people plugging things into the network without your knowledge. That's not good. I like to call it ACME, adds, changes, moves, and errors. Everybody gets caught out with switchport access, VLAN, whatever. Takes a lot of time. Malicious attacks goes without saying, rapid deployment, users moving around. Again, that's sort of part of the ACME bit, but again, it makes it a lot more agile and a lot more efficient. And lastly, the most important 2 points, I think, is security, segmentation, and consistency across the network. So it's a common user experience, so one network, one policy, one experience. And we want to use identity. We don't want to make decisions on who can access what based on an IP address, because IP addresses are pretty easy to come by, as you'll see through this demo. So we basically, the mantra around zero trust, that means different things to different people, but the way I summarize it is never assume trust, always verify, least privilege, and reaffirm if there's a change in circumstances. So for example, if a Kyocera printer suddenly becomes a Raspberry Pi, you want to do something about it, because that's usually a sign that somebody's spoofed a MAC address and plugged something else in. So these are the things that we're going to be covering today. Some of the challenges, if any of you have ever read the old IBM S2 deployment guide, and I know that Geoff mentioned the secured wired access prescriptive deployment guide last time, it doesn't look easy. When you read through that stuff, it looks complicated. It takes time, or the perception is it takes time. And a lot of people, and this isn't, a negative thing, it's just the nature of the healthcare environment, having worked in the NHS myself for a very long time, is exactly what's connected to the network. Again, it's a very fluid environment within health, so it's very difficult to keep track of what's there. That's the link there for the, if should you wish to read it, and I recommend that you do, certainly if you've got insomnia, read the Wired Access Prescriptive Deployment Guide. The detail in there is second, and as are most things that get posted, in terms of tech guidance. But that will really give you the deep dive into what we're doing today. When you actually look at it, there's an awful lot of config, and again, this is just for reference, which is one of the reasons why it puts people off actually deploying port security, for want of a better word, on a wired network, because when they look at everything they've got to configure, they go, oh, yeah, that's a lot of effort for not much return. And that is a put off for a lot of people. So what we're going to be doing today really is showing you the tools that you can use to do it. And it all revolves around what we call intent-based networking. So rather than actually worrying about what the actual configuration is, you just say, I want to do this. And there should be an orchestration and automation platform that will do it for you. Fortunately, that's Cisco Catalyst Center. So that it already exists. So a lot of this is already pre-built and pre-wrapped for you. This is all based on actual equipment that's currently living in Bedfont Lakes, our main UK office. It's all Catalyst 9Ks. It's using Identity Services Engine, as we said, Catalyst Center, as well as the actual orchestration platform. So this was done on real equipment. There's actually two ways, spoiler alert, of doing this. The first one is on your traditional network, without really doing anything radical, for want of a better word. It is going to be radical in terms of you're going to be basically making every access port exactly the same, right? That's pretty radical. The other way of doing it is software-defined access, and I'll touch on that a little bit later in this session. So that's what Catalyst Center looks like. And again, you can create your hierarchical maps, so on and so forth, and put your sites in. If those of you who've got multiple sites, and it's nice geo-mapped. Two things you need to check that you've got. Specifically, there's two boxes there. Application visibility gives you a real deep insight into what's happening on your network. Wired endpoint data collection is actually essential. You need to switch that on. That does IP device tracking. That allows .1x to work. And more importantly, it will actually enable you to run Cisco security groups, or TrustSec, which I know that Geoff talked about last time. One of the cool things is that you can globally assign your device credentials across all your devices, or you can actually filter them on a port site per site basis. Where we're going to get from is a typical port config, and this is fairly basic before anybody starts shouting, there's no BPDU guards or anything like that on that, but the principle is, I'm sure you've all seen this, switch port access VLAN, whatever, right? And that's typically what you see there, with the static VLAN assignment. And we've got some actual endpoints that are connected into this environment. Sorry, excuse me. DHCP assigned. There's no port security, the port's not shut down. There's nothing preventing people plugging in and getting an IP address, which is really not what we want. And I'm sure everybody will agree with that. That's not a good idea. Within Catalyst Center, sorry, I saw a little giggle there, thank you. Within IAC and Catalyst Center, what you actually want is to actually drive all this through a single platform, right? So whilst there are two components really to this, which is Identity Services Engine and Catalyst Center, you want everything really, the bulk of the configuration done via Catalyst Center in terms of your access policy. There are bits that you have to configure on both, but the main driver is through Catalyst Center. And it's quite easy to actually integrate that within Catalyst Center. I won't tell you the story about me spending half a day with certificates, and then somebody who was American said to me, there's a button to do that, Matt. Having spent half a day doing certificate exchange, it does all that for you. So hopefully you can see this video running, James. Are we all good?
Yeah, spot on.
Brilliant, cool. And that's basically it. You just tell Catalyst Center, here's my ISE box, and if you've got, a PAN and multiple PSNs underneath it, it will discover those as well as part of that process. So under network settings, you can then apply your AAA servers and other things, domain name, DNS and stuff like that. So that, again, it's all about the consistency. So you've got the choice there of, network, client, or both, right? And you just add the ISE servers in there. It really is about as straightforward as you can. You pick your PAN and it'll tell you then what your PSNs are that you're going to be using for that. Really straightforward. So the cool bit is when you actually then discover your existing networks. So what we've done so far is just set Catalyst Center up to do that. And when we now discover things, it will then provide uniform configuration to all the devices when you assign them to a site. So this is really where stuff starts getting exciting. Using the discovery, put in the range of, whether you've got using loopbacks. Loopbacks are always good because they're always up. Or if you're using a particular management VLAN for your switches, etc. But you just put the range in that you want to discover, and it will go off and do its thing, and you'll see the result of this. Again, it's quite simple. This is the actual process on Catalyst Center. You can use loopback if you want. You can then assign the credentials that you've assigned globally. That we saw in the previous slide. You can put your SNMP stuff on as well, as you would expect. And one of the things that we like is netconf. And that basically means that the way the configuration is pushed up the devices is done a lot more efficiently. So everything is netconf yang. For those of you into your sort of coding and stuff like that. You can assign devices during discovery to a site. I'm doing it separately for the purposes of clarity here. You just view the discovery, see what's going on. You'll actually see all these devices pop up in a second. And what you can see there on the actual consoles of these devices then is Catalyst Center logging into those devices and collecting not just inventory, but an awful lot of the state of that device at that point in time. There's a lot of show commands it does that I'd completely forgotten about. So again, it really couldn't be any more straightforward. Yeah, and we've all done discoveries on things before. You then really assign them to a site. So you just pick the devices that you want to assign, quite simply assign them to a site. So these would be your sites that you've got built within Catalyst Center. And for those of you using Prime Infrastructure previously, you can import all of your site hierarchy and topologies into Catalyst Center automatically. It will just migrate everything across for you if you're coming from Prime environment. And then you just say, go. You can preview the config if you want, but for the purposes of this, we don't want to be doing that. We just want to do it. And what then happens is that obviously they will get tagged to a particular site, but interestingly as well, you will get config that's pushed out to those devices as well. And a lot of that config, when you read the deployment guide, this is just some of it, is the stuff that usually catches people out around what the AAA servers are, what the radius responses are, etc. And it also does some of the certificate exchange as well. But interestingly, it also does the TrustSec authorization list as well. And this is, you don't have to create a template to do this, it just happens. The other thing that's really cool is that the switches that you then discovered also get registered into Identity Services Engine as network access devices, which is, again, something that we've all forgotten to do, me included, and then wondering why it's not working. And as you can see, it also assigns then the TrustSec components as well onto it. So there's a pack, and I'm sure Josh talked about packless as well. But in order to maintain that security, the device's ID and the password are automatically built into ISE as well. So that's a sort of precursor to what we're doing. But the big thing is, how do you actually get this massive config that is, described in the deployment guide? How do you get that out there without any cut and paste errors? You don't want to be doing this stuff manually. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a tool to deploy this for you? Well, it is. And again, it's within Catalyst Center. So you go into your CLI templates under design. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff already pre-built for you if you want. You can create a project or just a template. And then again, you just add the project to it. And what we're giving you here, which you'll get in the PowerPoints, and it's both here and right at the end in text format, we're actually giving you a template that you can build on or use, right? Test it first, please, to actually push out to your devices to achieve what we're doing today. Because one of the big questions that I always get is, yeah, well, you made that look easy. What now? Well, here's the what now. We're giving you the stuff. Not only does this do the security element that we're talking about, it also does device profiling. So it'll set the switches up as well, profile the devices as they connect to the network, send all the information off to ICE that then builds the profile for them. And we'll cover a bit more on it, where the AI part comes in as well a little bit later on. But all the config is here for you. Again, I'm just going to click through this because nobody wants to read CLI. But it's all.
Yeah. 1 second delay on your voice and the slide, so but it's fine.
Yeah, thank you, James. I was just clicking through a load of CLI there, so it's probably just as well there was a delay, James, because everybody would have fallen asleep otherwise. But all the configuration is there for you, following this. So we're actually going to show you how you do it. But before we do, again, I'm sure most of you probably know this, but in monitor or low impact modes, ISE will actually profile your endpoints. So without actually, what that means is without actually imposing any access restrictions or access controls on devices, if you run them in monitor mode, you will gather a total inventory of what's connected or what port on your network. And not only that, it will actually then build the profile. So it will tell you it's a CT scanner, it'll tell you it's a printer, it'll tell you it's a vending machine, whatever it is, a Windows laptop, right? It will tell you what it is as well and where it is. So that's really useful. And again, it doesn't impact on the operation of the network. It won't override the VLAN that's assigned on the port. But I know what you're saying. If you can't log in, so things like CT scanners, a lot of the sort of DICOM equipment, whatever, right? Pathology machines, right? They don't have a GINA to allow them to log in, right? Enter the world of MAB, MAC authentication bypass. So again, this is automatically configured within that template. There's a rule within ISE to say if it's a MAB device, and then you can create a different set of rules. And the cool thing is, again, if you run it in low impact or monitor first, you'll discover what these devices are. It'll do it for you, right? So you get a fantastic inventory at the end of it about what's actually plugged in on your network. So let's do it. I always like doing this bit. I'm not doing this live, by the way. This is recorded. In case I'm not that brave. So the stuff that we highlighted earlier on. So we create a project. I'm not going to lie. This is basically a rerun of the Cisco live session. But create your project. Give the template a name that you're going to be using. As you can see there, you've got regular templates and composite templates. So you can build, if thens and stuff like that into the template. But this is very simply taking that config that I showed you earlier, putting it into a project within Catalyst Center that we can then use to push out to devices. And again, you can put various things, device tags and things like that if you want, right? Always tag it to end system because these are existing kit, not day zero. Paste your config in, and as if by magic, boom, there it goes. So that's the config I shared with you earlier. And just commit that. That's pretty straightforward. Next step, when you actually then go create a network profile for it, for switching in this case, click on your day end template, give it a name. That's the template that you previously posted in there. Add the template. A second to think about it. And then what we can do is you can assign that to a site. Now you could have, floors, buildings, whatever, right? It's entirely up to you how you create your hierarchy and where you actually deploy it. That will actually then deploy to the site. Got to make sure I click when it needs to. And then actually pushing it is really simple. Again, you just go into your CLI template there. It says not provision. You hit, ironically, provision it and go. Tell you which devices it's applicable to. So I'm doing it on my edge devices. It'll ask you a couple of times the are you sure kind of stuff. and you can see there's no variables there. We want to deploy it now. Again, you can preview it or you can schedule it. It'll check. The cool thing is it'll check your devices are ready for it. You know, and again, that's one of the things where sometimes this thing goes wrong, where the device just wasn't ready. So it'll do all those checks for you. And it's actually will show you then when you actually see the success part of it, the configuration that's been pushed out to those devices. You'll actually see them within inventory that those devices have had the template and there's no conflicts and everything was lovely. What that looks like in terms of the port now, as you can see, we put the flow control stuff on because we've discovered that devices. We're using a template now rather than putting all the commands that we previously did with IBNS1. They're included now within a template. And as you can see, we've got MBAR protocol discovery, we've got source template, port.1x close is the important bit. There is a command which is called, you know, I'm sure you've all seen the show derived config or show run all on the interface. That's what the template is actually applying. Obviously, when you do a show run, you don't see all that, right? But the important parts there is the authentication bits have been put in, the access session has been put in. That access session there is showing closed. So that is, you have to log in and then everything will be assigned dynamically to you. Important thing to bear in mind, right, is that what this gives you the benefit of is that every single port in your network can be configured identically. You can just basically put the switch port access bit, you can just put that into, you know, what we use in terms of critical VLAN, in this case VLAN 208, it'll get overridden by the access policy, all right? So all your ports are the same, which is, I'm sure you all agree, it's nice. You need to obviously enable wide endpoint on whatever client you're using, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever. And again, most of you will be using group policies, MDMs or Intune or something like that, where you can actually just enable the wired auto and then enable like the .1x within the GNet. You'll see now that I'm actually logging in on these devices. So you can see myself and James and one of my colleagues called Glenn logged in. And we've all run individual authorization profiles, right? Which is the part there where you can see towards the right where I'm in corporate, Glenn's in IoT because he's a machine, and then James, unfortunately, for the purposes of this, is a contractor today. And you can see the denies as well. So the denies are there because the devices aren't known. And that may be what you want. This is one of the reasons that we run it in low impact or monitor mode firstly. So devices are logged in, you can see that what process they're running. You also see as well that they started profiling. So Windows 11 workstation. These are all running virtual. So if they were hardware stuff, right, it would actually tell you it's a Lenovo Windows 11 or MacBook or whatever. When we actually, this is all done through policy sets within ICE. So this is, again, it's a one-time hit. You do this, and then when it's done, it's done. You manage everything through Catalyst Center. And as you can see there, we've got .1x, which is using my Active Directory. MAB is using internal mpods, and default is all, but default would be, you know, I never know whether it's an implicit or explicit deny. I'm going to always get those confused, but it would be a deny. And as you can see then, the authorization result would be different depending on, in this example, I'm saying, well, if you're a member of a particular Active Directory group, then that's the result I want to run. So for me, it was I'm a member of corporate, so I'll run my corporate result. Where you actually build these rules, if you like, there is a condition studio within ICE, which is really cool. It's really intuitive. And as you can see, I've just expanded what I'm doing. So it's basically saying external group in my Active Directory equals that, then do this. And you'll see those then built within the policy results on ISE. And within that, then you can actually assign the VLANs. So I'm assigning myself to VLAN 200. For somebody else, they'd be VLAN 206. Yes, so contractor James, that means is going to go into 206. And then you can see when you actually look at your live sessions, you'll actually see where they're logged in. You see that IP address. So I'm 200, James is 206 in terms of subnet. The devices are profiled. And also with James, you'll see he's posture checked. So there's some bonus content at the end of this that we probably won't do today, but that will show you how to do posture checking as well as device profiling. And so what I mean by that is Windows up to date? Is there antivirus running on it? Is Windows Firewall actually running? Have they got a cloud service like iCloud installed on the device? And if so, do something about it. But the point is here, they're authenticated. So that's great. We're doing dynamic VLAN assignment. Our network is secured at this point. But we want to do a bit more than that. We're never happy, right? You know, well, is it a better way? Because we're still then relying on firewalls or ACLs, yeah, to actually control access. And we all know what happens with that. Somebody moves to a different part of the building or indeed a different site. The rule might not be there, and then they either can or can't access something that they should be. So again, as a reference there, within Cisco Live, you can actually look at the session archives within Cisco Live. It's free to, it's free to create an account. And I'm just referencing our very good friend that you heard from last time, Reeves. One of the best sessions, right? You'll see that then. And again, we'll post the links later on. And what that gives us, again, just a refresher, what we're talking about is rather than identifying a device based on its IP address, we're actually doing it now on identity. Yeah, and then we can put things into specific groups based on what the identity is. So again, reduce firewall rules, ACLs, whatever. We don't want that. East-west traffic, and it reduces, more importantly, than the consistent security policies. So it doesn't matter where somebody goes, that policy will follow them, and you don't have to then update an ACL or update a firewall rule. Nice little picture. So that's what we do. And again, it's quite simple then to group things. And again, within a healthcare environment, you certainly have BMS, you can have pathology, outpatients, whatever. The choice is entirely yours, right? It's really powerful in how you can actually group things together. So actually adding TrustSec into, again, this comes through Catalyst Center. So we go to a thing that we call group-based access control. Catalyst Center, as we said earlier, has already put, as part of that, when you assign it to a site, it's put the CTS, Cisco TrustSec server list, automatically onto the switches for you. You don't have to create that in the template. It's done when you assign the device to a site. So we then, at this point, tell Catalyst Center to be the big boss, if you like. So this will mean that all your access controls and policies, access contracts, security groups are all managed through Catalyst Center. So you're not jumping in and out between Cat Center and ISE. After we hit that start migration button, Catalyst Center becomes it. Again, you can add the security groups then from within Catalyst Center. It will import what's already there. And again, it's quite simple. So you see that I've got a security group there called corporate already. So I'll create the one for James called contractor. Really is that simple. Yeah. And again, this isn't a technology thing. This is purely, this will map what your business structure is. Yeah. So people tend to start quite vague, for want of a better word, and then make it more granular as time goes on, because you'll be able to see what's actually talking to what across the network. And again, this just gets replicated for you into ISE. As you can see, ISE actually gets the same information automatically. So what we want to do now actually is, because now we're going to be using TrustSec as well as VLAN assignments, we're going to put people, and the purpose is that you could still have things on the same switch effectively, that you want to stop talking to each other, right? And this is where it comes in. So what we do now is we modify or create new authorization policies within ICE. And what we're saying there is, rather than VLAN, we're going to go security group. Yeah, and again, if you've got VRFs, you'll see the VRF popping down there as well, a virtual network. So basically saying, well, for that result that we're going to use in a second, put it in this security group and that VLAN. And you'll see slightly different there, the contractor. And again, they pop up now as a different set of rules. Sorry, excuse me, choking to death. Quick drink. That's basically how you do it. So I'm just creating a new rule now, which is based on a security group. Again, rather than just a dynamic VLAN assignment. So I'll pick the group that we want to use, and then we happen to know that it's VLAN, can't remember myself, 204. Simple as that. And you'll see then we've changed the policies. So it's still pretty much the same if it's a member of, in my case, corporate. What I'm now doing is just running a different authorization result called SG Corp. When you now log in, you'll see an extra bit there where it's popped up on the side. Now, okay, so there's the devices, myself, James, Glenn, we're logged back in. We're using .1x, it's profiled the device. There's my authorization profile now, it's changed to the new one. And you will see now that it's actually assigned the security group. So when you actually look at the Radius Live log, you'll see it's actually got an SGT on it now. Security group rather than just a VLAN. To enable that, there's a little bit more config that you need to push out. Really simple. So for your VLAN list, you would just put CTS role-based enforcement on, and on the trunk, there's a couple of commands you put in there, but you already know how to do that. It's through a CLI template. So you're sitting there thinking, well, that's all well and good, mate. So what? Again, just to repeat, you know, there's no firewall hairpinning, there's no ACLs or access control lists. It enforces east-west. So what we have is the matrix, not the blue pill, red pill one. What this matrix gives you, as you can see from there, is your groups across the top and groups across the bottom. And I bet you can't guess what you do. So you either put a permit or deny within that particular matrix. Yeah. So what we want to do is you get specific access contracts that are predefined for you, right? So you particular deny IP, permit IP, a few little bits you get out of the box, yes, but you can create your own access contracts, obviously. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to block ping, right? Just so you can see what actually happens. Now, the cool thing is this can be on a, rather than just doing, you know, an implicit deny, you can actually do it on a per application basis as well if you want, which is really powerful. So if you remember right back at the beginning where I ticked the box for application visibility, what happens is that through telemetry, the switches will start telling Catalyst Center what applications are in use across the network. You can define your own custom applications as well. So there's things that NBAR and CBAR, which are application recognition technologies, won't know about. So for example, your PAC system, we're not going to know about that probably. What we will see is a lot of traffic heading towards a particular destination, and then it will then suggest to you, this looks like an app, do you want to do something about it? And again, that can be used with quality of service as well. So there are multiple, you know, variations you can do on this. Yeah. So we're basically for this purpose deny ping, right, or ICMP. Again, this could be any application within your environment, whether the system discovers it for you, whether it exists under MBAR, and or whether it's CBAR, so the controller based. So you things like Microsoft Office and things like that, whatever you want to block, you can do it through this, and it's really simple. So you just create the access contract, and then that's it. So we're actually going to show you this. So what we've got now is, again, we've got the matrix that we talked about. So between corporate and contractor, as you can see, I've got a ping running there towards James's machine from mine. We're going to basically say, well, we just want to block ping on there. It pops into the matrix. I'm just for the purposes of belt and braces, so I want it to stop in both directions, putting it both ways. We save that policy, and then you just deploy it. Doesn't deploy automatically, you need to hit the deploy button for the purposes of safety. And what you'll see literally within about 2 seconds, the request timed out. So that policy through TrustSec is now enforced. Now, you got to admit, if you compare doing an ACL or a firewall rule, and bear in mind again, right, this is going to follow now those endpoints wherever they go in the network, right? So you don't have to, somebody moves, you know, they might obviously circumvent then the rule if they move, right? Or somebody then has got to go into your SecOps people or your firewall people, and they've got to make a change. With this, it's literally done, and hopefully within about a second, there you go, the replies come back. So you've taken the rule off, and it started working again. And that really is the power of TrustSec. Again, it's all based on identity, but it's just so simple then to deploy access policies. Also a cool thing, when you start building this up and when you start classifying the devices and put them into SGTs, you'll actually start seeing the flow between these endpoints within Catalyst Center. And I think this is one of the most, you know, powerful tools that we've got within Catalyst Center, because people don't know what's talking to what, and you might say, so what? Well, if you've suddenly got a vendor machine talking to a CT scanner, it'll show up on you. And you might think, well, a vendor machine really doesn't need to be talking to a CT scanner. That's a security risk. So you just create a policy then between vendor machines and CT scanners and say block, and it's done. But I know what you're asking. What about the AI? We mentioned this a bit earlier on around endpoint analytics. One of the biggest challenges, again, is knowing what's across the network. It's really important, right? So this exists within Catalyst Center. And what it'll start doing, again, then, it's pulling this information. It's a two-way bi-directional thing between itself and ISE. We want to manage it all through Catalyst Center. So it'll give you an endpoint inventory. Yeah, so it'll start telling you what's happening. One of the cool things, it shows MAC randomization as well. Obviously, Android, Apple devices, and even Windows now do a randomized MAC address. It'll tell you which ones they are. But it also gives you AI proposals. So this is a really powerful tool in order to, again, discover what's on your network. We've got a bunch of about, several thousand things that we know in terms of what the profiles are. But you may have something a little bit quirky, right? If in the NHS, I don't mean quirky respectfully, right? Things that don't pop up in any other environment. And what AI endpoint analytics will do is actually start classifying those devices for you. And there's some crowd-based stuff that gets pulled into it as well. It's all anonymized. But as you can see there, it'll actually give you then, it'll list those devices and actually tell you, we found 7 of these things. We think it's a Siemens CT scanner. Do you want to create a profile for that? And then do something about it. So that's a really, really powerful tool. And the cool thing that is, because we're doing it in line, there's no need to put taps on your network, and there's absolutely no need to do RSPAN on your network. This profile is done by ISE as part of the authentication process, and then the initial packet metadata will actually build those device profiles for you. How are we doing for time, James?
We got 20 minutes to the top of the hour, so I think you're on track.
I'm on track. Excellent. One of the other things that it gives you then is a trust score. Again, this is really important. So as you can see there, this is the devices now that it is classified and identified in endpoint inventory. It shows you it's a virtual machine. It's Windows 11 Pro and it's running on VMware. Again, if it wasn't VMware, it would say Lenovo, whatever it is, right? But that trust score is really important. So if you've got a device then that is a little bit flaky in some respects or isn't secure enough, it'll tell you why. It tells you the authentication method. It will also then tell you in terms of if you've got posture checking running that it's compliant or non-compliant. So is it patched? Does it run in X, Y, and Z? Gives you obviously the IP address, and it'll actually tell you as well if it's spoofed a MAC address, or if any sort of threats that you can identify, it will actually start picking those up for you. Again, with profile rules, we said we several thousand, 3,337 last time I checked, out of the box. And the amount of devices that are in there, you just won't believe it, right? And those are provided by default. But as you saw earlier on, it will also start to classify devices on your network that it doesn't really know about, and it will find common features between them and give you the opportunity then to create a policy or a profile based on that. The other thing that's really cool is Talos. So again, this is something that is unique to Cisco. They're the biggest, I think, specifically, James, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the biggest security internal organization globally, I believe. They do. Go on, James. Thank you. They, and again, I hesitate mentioning this to the people who work in healthcare, but it was Talos that actually discovered what was going on with WannaCry, and indeed how to fix it. They've done other things as well. Where Microsoft 365 goes pear-shaped, it's usually Talos to tell people what's happened. That's integrated into AI endpoint analytics and within Catalyst Center. The power of that is the AI spoofing detection or MAC spoofing. If a device then, for example, changes from being a printer to a Raspberry Pi as an example, that's my particular favorite, that's one thing it'll flag. Yeah. The other thing then will say, well, let's try to contact a malware site. You can configure it to automatically take action, right? What I say to people is create a ticket that will alert your ITSM, right? And that's all integrated in Catalyst Center as well. It'll automatically fire a ticket saying this device connected to this switch on this port has just changed its MAC address and it's trying to contact the malware site. What you want to do about it? The choices are quarantine, port bounce, shutdown. So that's called adaptive network control. It's a subset of what we do with network stealth watch, we used to call it. But it's a very, very powerful tool. It'll give you that alert if something horrible is happening on your network. So before we go on to the next bit, within the space of, what was it, 44 minutes, James, what we've actually done there is discovered a network. We've pushed out secure configuration onto all the devices to enable or to require authentication to get on. Again, there's different stages that you'll see in the template where you can, select low impact monitor mode or closed authentication. Closed is if your authentication fails, you ain't getting on. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And then obviously monitor mode is, it doesn't even ask, right? It'll just discover the device. But you're asking, right, well, it's still looking a little bit complicated, Matt. We've got to do all these templates and stuff like that. So, it wouldn't be a Cisco Prezo if we didn't talk about a better way of doing it. What we've done, it works. I've done that with a number of my particular customers, and yeah, they go, thanks very much, we've done it. I'm very happy about it. For other people, then they want a bit more automation and orchestration than that we've already seen. And given that we did all that in 40 minutes, right? I think you'd have to admit that that's pretty swift, right? The biggest challenge is thinking about what the policy is going to be before you do it. I always recommend running in low impact monitor mode first. That will give you an idea then about what policies you want to create when you apply that closed doors. The simpler way of doing it, in a lot of respects, is software defined access. Again, what we then do with this is this will actually build a network from scratch using best practices. And my particular favorite is when it builds what we call the underlay before we then put the overlay, which is the fabric on it. It uses LAN automation. So it will build a routed layer 3 to the edge network using equal cost multipath. So you don't get spanning tree, right? Which to me is just, that's the holy grail, right? That is nirvana, whatever you want to call it. If we can get rid of networks, and again, if this was in person, I would be asking you at this point, who's been bitten by spanning tree, and everybody would be putting their hand up, right? Because we have, right? Spanning tree is a necessary evil and has been for a long time. But if we can eliminate that using layer 3 to the edge, which has been our campus high availability design guide since the early 2000s, that's the way to do it. But then the eagle-eyed amongst you will say, well, hang on a minute, what if I've got a VLAN that's spanning multiple edge switches or multiple cabinets, right? If it's layer 3 to the edge, then that's not going to traverse the layer 3 boundary. That's where the fabric comes in. So the fabric sits across the top, so it doesn't really matter then what the wet bits of string are that are sitting underneath it. That will just create what we call a VXLAN tunnel between endpoints on the network. So it doesn't matter if they're in different switch cabinets, it's layer 3 on the underneath, and we put an overlay across the top. And overlay is not anything to be frightened of, right? MPLS is an overlay, there's a load of lists there, right? What we do with cap WAP in wireless is an overlay, yeah? So these aren't new things. We then get a really simple way of deploying everything that we've deployed earlier on, literally automatically. I'm not going to run, you'll be pleased to hear, my SD Access demo, although I did do it in how many minutes last week, James? I can't remember. Not long. But you can actually build a network from scratch through Catalyst Center, and it is pretty much automated, right? You can create virtual networks or VRFs, and that will give you macro segmentation. So, for example, you'd want your patients to be completely isolated without putting a different network in there. VLAN isn't enough. So we put a VRF in there and put all our patients and guests, visitors, wherever, into a VRF. You might have building management stuff will be in a VRF, and then you may have your medical stuff is in a VRF. So that's what we call macro segmentation. And by default, VRFs or virtual networks can't talk to each other, which is where you want to be. But then we bring in micro segmentation, which you've already seen, which is security groups, TrustSec. Yeah. So you may, even though things may be within the same virtual network or VRF, you may want to start then, as we did earlier on, blocking specific applications for people. Or if your Coke machines and your CT scanners, to keep things consistent, are in the same VRF, you don't want those two talking to each other. So that's then where micro segmentation comes in, which we've obviously demonstrated previously. Provisioning, dead simple. It uses best practice, right? Rather than anybody running, through a Cisco validated design or whatever, it's all built in. It's there. You get these stretched subnets with broadcast suppression. So again, wherever your device goes, and this sort of messes with some people, you can take the same effective IP subnet wherever you go, right? That's not mandatory, right? It's just one of the features you can do because we're running VXLAN. Important bit to reiterate, it's policy enforcement. It's based on your identity, not your address, which you've already done. This just takes it another level of automation. So again, using Catalyst Center, just to conclude, and we're a bit in front of time, James, which is a miracle, mate. You can automate the steps, if you're using with SDA without the templates. If you don't want to use SDA, use the templates. It's built on best practice. The entire network, then you have a consistent policy. That's the important thing. Every switch port is secure. Every switch port is the same. There's less admin changes. It's a lot simpler. Somebody moves department or just literally moves a device from one place to another. Policy is going to follow them wherever they go. Different buildings, the policy will still be there. There's no firewall rules. There's no ACLs. It's just done wherever they log in. It's all based on identity. You get, as you can see, a little bit of the flavor there of some of the visibility you get into the network through endpoint device profiling, the assurance you get in terms of their threat score or trust scores within it, and it's all done via one platform in Catalyst Center. So before I hand over to James to wrap up, a couple of things. Please read the documentation. I know it's a lot, but you get a thorough understanding. By all means, rewatch this session. I'm sure James will share the recording. Before you deploy it in production, my plea to you is please test. Check it out first. Or just pick on a particular switch and see how it works. And of course, you can reach out to your account team and find a friendly or unfriendly SE. We're all friendly. Some bonus content. Thank you. I finished there, but when you look through the slides, and obviously we're not going to cover this today due to the sheer magnitude of what you can do with posture checking, but it's got all of the information in here as well about how you can actually deploy posture checking or compliance across your network, again, using ISE and Catalyst Center. And again, the amount of things that you can actually check the mind boggles, right? If you can think of it, registry keys, whatever you can think of, you can check that when a device tries to authenticate onto the network. You can do things then like remediation or you said quarantine, whatever you can think of. Yeah, and it's all part of our zero trust workplace within Catalyst Center. And there's a lot of workflows there. Again, I'd encourage you to have a look through that. It's basically a how-to guide of deploying posture checking, which is again one of the things that people always struggle with. So I really hope that was a beneficial use of 52 minutes for you all. As you can see, hopefully from the fact that we did it within less than an hour, that this isn't as complicated as it looks when you read the documentation. So we're all about simplifying and automation and using orchestration where we can, and hopefully you'd have seen from that it just works. James, we're done.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it. And one of the questions that I personally loathe is we did get a licensing question. Didn't quite bring me to tears. Appreciate you all asking questions. Joff eloquently answered that. But really the whole point of certainly of this session was to show the art of the possible and show that, we would always love a customer to have the full suite of things and advantage licensing, but actually with Essentials licensing, you can achieve this level of, you can achieve .1x, which, on a wired and wireless port. Clearly by upgrading to things like Advantage, that introduces things like the ability to profile. So again, we're just trying to say, look, here you probably already have Cisco infrastructure, you probably already have an ICE license, the stuff you can do with what you've got in Essentials, and actually the stuff that you can do with as Matt said, with profiling, being able to find those, not necessarily a medical device, but something, I don't know, like a vending machine. Sorry, I'll put my video on now. And then, even, kind of once we've got all those kind of basics, then we can kind of move into the world of posture. And again, then you sort of move into the world of integration with MDM for additional kind of checks and balances against machines that you already have. But we can do the basics here, I think, is what we're really trying to get over here. Please let us know if you want to see more of the automation around Fabric. I know, Matt, you have a Cisco Live session. Go ahead. You can do a shameful plug.
Yeah.
What's the session?
Thank you, James. The session is BreakOps 2584. I almost forgot there for a second. Securing the wired network. So it was Cisco Live Amsterdam back in February, which I actually haven't recovered from it yet, James. So again, if you go on to Cisco Live, again, it's free to create an account on Cisco Live. You can view all the session archives. Again, you can see Joff's fantastic sessions around TrustSec as well, which I watched many times, by the way, Joff, just saying. And you will actually, if you search for BreakOps 2584, you'll find basically a recording of somebody Welsh squirming in front of 370 people. Horrific. But yeah, feel free to watch.
I don't know if while I was talking, there was a question came in. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to review that. I think we'll probably just leave the call open to. I don't know if anyone can answer that on audio or somebody's already got it on. It's typing away a response. Biggest use case: stopping suppliers and contractors from connecting to our network and using, lack of security as collateral to drive their sales agendas. In truth. Though we don't get all the time to read the documentation. I don't know if anyone's got any kind of comments on that one.
Yeah, quite simply, when you secure the ports on the network, that we term that as shadow IT. Yeah, it will stop them because if they can't authenticate or if it's not a known device. So one of the rules you can create, you can do this with certificates as well. Obviously, so rather than just using username and password, you can use a combination of both, which we call leak chaining. So it can even if somebody gets somebody else's username, if they don't have then a trusted device certificate on there, they won't get in. So that's using a thing called TEEP, which is effectively leak chaining. So you can then stop unknown devices, whether it be suppliers, contractors, whatever, connecting to your network.
Level of granularity that wasn't necessarily there before. So yeah, hopefully that helps. I'll just give it one more minute for questions. I don't know if any of the panelists have got anything to add that I may have missed. No, Matt didn't miss anything. So
thanks, Jim.
We just a comment on the recordings. I did mention that they've been sent out, and then someone said, "Well, I joined and they haven't been sent out." So my apologies for you guys not getting the recordings from the last couple of weeks. We're on it. We'll make sure that everybody who has registered and attended now gets all 3 sessions. And I know, Matt, you'd also mentioned about the templates, being able to go with that. Is that just grabbing that from the slides, or do you supply that as a separate?
Yeah. So this question just came in that no, you don't. So TEEP is supported natively within Windows, Gina, and Mac OS and Linux now. So yeah, it's you just basically enable that in the available authentication methods within us, and TEEP will be available by default.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, and the full config, James, is available at the end of the slides in text format. I know we're going to PDF them, right, which kind of messes up. You can still copy and paste PDF stuff, right? But yeah, if anybody wants to, if anybody wants a template, let us know, and we'll happily share that with you. Again, read through it, have a look at the template, make sure it's tweaked to your environment, and certainly in terms of interface ranges and VLANs and stuff like that. Yeah, it's going to have to match your environment.
James, I was just going to say, whilst there's a little bit of lifting getting these sessions up and running, we all thoroughly enjoy getting to spend some time with you as customers. What we would appreciate is some feedback around this format, whether you found it useful, because it's something we would be more than happy to try and continue maybe after the summer as well.
Okay, well, really appreciate everyone's attendance and attention. We'll bring that to a close, and as I say, all the materials will be going out shortly. And thank you, Matt, for today. Excellent. And thank you to Geoff for your session last week as well. So thank you, everybody, and have a nice bank holiday weekend.
Oh yeah, it's bank holiday. Thank you.